Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being covered in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Matt Knight, and I am joined today by North Coast Journal News Editor Thad Greenson and Arts and Features Editor Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
Not too bad. I should mention that Dave Frank is away from the microphone, obviously, this week, and he should be back with us next week, so we look forward to that. So let's just dive right into the edition of the North Coast Journal. Thad, it sounds like COVID, and maybe just a little smidge of COVID in your coverage this week.
Unfortunately, lots of COVID coverage, yeah. Remember we had that little respite where case counts were really low and it seemed like there was nothing COVID to write about or talk about?
I look back fondly on that.
Yeah.
Good times. Good times.
They are over. I'm sorry to report. This week I have a story looking at kind of the parallel stories of our case counts rising pretty substantially over the last few weeks, and at the same time, seeming vaccination interest locally seeming to kind of wane as more people have become eligible and supply has increased a bit. We've had just a really kind of shocking number of vaccine appointments go unfilled. And so this week I tried to dive into those two things and talk to folks at county public health and then some doctors in the local community about, what we're seeing and what some solutions might be.
And so what do you think the upshot of that was? Did you get a feeling for why these appointments are going unfilled? Is it cultural? Is it fear of side effects? Some other reasons?
So it is kind of all of the above. I think I and a lot of people were kind of apparently foolishly under the assumption that there'd be incredible vaccine demand for a while. It was just, after all, a few weeks ago when the county opened up eligibility to everybody 16 and up in Humboldt County, which brought kind of tens of thousands of people newly into the fold of being vaccine eligible. And I figured that was really going to be enough to keep appointments pretty stacked and keep doses in pretty high demand for quite a while. And starting a couple weeks ago, public health started announcing that they had hundreds of open appointments. And then last week we found out that kind of got to such a dire situation that they had to give 1,000 doses of vaccine to San Francisco that were in danger of expiring. And then this week actually declined an additional 1,000 doses from the state, fearing that they wouldn't be able to get them in people's arms. And so, but I had a really eye-opening conversation with two local doctors, Stephanie Dittmer, who is the immediate past president of the Humboldt Del Norte Medical Society, and then Candy Stockton, who is the chief medical officer at the Humboldt Independent Practice Association. And they were both really not surprised to see kind of vaccine appointments going unfulfilled. And Dr. Stockton really kind of broke it down to me, I think, in a really kind of illuminating way. And she said, you got to think about, for these mass vaccination appointments, they really cater to a certain type of person. They cater to the person, roughly 50% of the community who have been just chomping at the bit to get a vaccine for months now, and have been really kind of dialed into, reading about COVID, the dangers, reading about the science behind the vaccines, and are just really anxious to kind of take this next step. But by its very nature, kind of a mass clinic requires that kind of, desire from the recipient, because they need to seek out the clinic, they need to show up there, they need to try to get this thing. And it's not a healthcare setting where they have somebody that's going to guide them through this decision. This is for people who have already made the decision. They want a vaccine as soon as possible, and they can proactively go get there. And they kind of have their thumbs on the pulse of the community and realize that for a lot of local residents, that's just not the case. They're not that eager. But they were both really careful about explaining, too, that when we're talking about, vaccine hesitancy, sure, there's a small percentage of those folks who have made up their mind that they're not going to get the vaccine. But for the vast majority of folks who fall into that category, or maybe don't have either the means or the desire to get to a mass vaccination clinic in a population center in Humboldt County, they have questions. They're unsure, and they have things that they want to talk through, with a healthcare provider who knows them or somebody that trusts them. And so, rather than kind of taking a doom and gloom view that the sky is falling and there's no way we're going to get enough people vaccinated locally to reach herd immunity because these appointments are going unfilled, both of them really said this is just a sign that the county needs to start taking a different approach and needs to start meeting people where they are through mobile vaccination clinics, through clinics set up at workplaces, at schools, at community centers, in outlying areas, having mobile clinics set up at volunteer fire departments, and places like that, like places where people feel comfortable, where they're going to see people that they trust, familiar faces, and where they feel like they can go and have a conversation with a provider about whether these vaccines are right for them, about the choice that they're going to make.
Okay, so with a low vaccination rate, or I don't know if we're lower than average, if we're right in there with the rest of the state and the country, but there are obviously consequences for not achieving a certain level of vaccinations. And so did they have anything to say about, and for example, I read this morning that the variant, one of the variants has landed in Humboldt County. And so have they got a feel for, the consequences of having such a low, or maybe it's not low.
Right now, just to the point of whether our rates are currently low. Right now, I think it's about 41% of Humboldt residents have received at least one dose of the vaccine, and that's fairly close to in line with national averages. The state's a bit ahead of that. I think what's different here is that we're at that mark, but then we have these appointments that are going unfilled, and so the concern is that interest is waning and stuff like that. So yeah, they absolutely believe that, as the kind of the national experts have said, is that, to reach kind of herd immunity where the virus starts to kind of really die out and cease to become an issue, we need to get 70 to 85% of folks vaccinated. And that's 70 to 85% of everybody, not just, those 16 and up. So, that is a concern. And, they say one of the things that, folks need to consider is really this idea that, this is, while being an intensely personal health decision of whether to get a vaccine, whether to have this, shot into your body, there's also a real community element to it. And that, if we want to get to the places where schools are open, coming in the fall, and open in a more normalized way, and businesses have some stability as far as what regulations are going to be, and our economy can kind of get chugging again, and we can start to think about traveling for the holidays and visiting friends and family, or having them into our homes, and all those kinds of things that we think of as normal. The ticket to getting there is not just me or you or somebody else getting vaccinated, but it's really 85% of us, almost all of us getting vaccinated. And so that is, that's a thing that people need to consider, and they're urging people to consider, and especially those folks who, don't have a history of allergic reactions or something that really gives them personal pause about the safety of the vaccine. But for those folks who more think, well, I'm young and I'm healthy, I'm not that at risk of COVID, so I don't really feel the need to get the vaccine. For those folks, they're saying, really, do that for your community. If you don't have a direct concern about the vaccine, then get it. Because it'll help and help your neighbors, it'll help the entire community.
Sure. So, Humboldt being a rural community, spread out, and I imagine that they're probably planning some outreach efforts to, marginalized communities, people that are out in the hinterlands. I noted with interest the very low vaccination rate in Hoopa. And in the tribal communities. And so I'm just wondering if they had a feel or ideas for outreach to those communities.
Yeah, so at a press conference last week, Lindsay Mendez, who's a public health nurse, a nurse family practitioner who's on the county's vaccine task force, talked about kind of how the task force is contemplating next steps and really looking at how to meet people where they are and get vaccines in the arms that way. And so they are planning a whole mobile clinic schedule that will be rolling out soon. She did not talk specifically about about issues with tribal communities. I think that that's an interesting challenge that officials are going to face, and I think Hoopa is a really good example of that. While for lots of outlying areas around Humboldt County, access has been a problem because most of these mass clinics have been in population centers, have been in Eureka or Arcata. And so, they have to make plans to travel. They need to have a means to travel here and stuff like that. Hoopa is different because they've gotten some federal allocations of vaccine and were able to have some mass vaccine clinics out there. Those were dismally attended, is the truth. They had attempted to open eligibility to everybody in the Klamath Trinity region, really wanting to create kind of what a spokesperson I talked to there deemed a protective bubble for the Hoopa Valley Reservation. And they had about 1,000 doses, and I think just over 300 people showed up. And so they similarly, the tribal government in Hoopa is kind of trying to recalculate what their next steps are. They're not going to do another vaccine clinic, another mass vaccine clinic, because they said it just wasn't effective. So they're switching their strategy to really, now that schools are back in session there, having some kind of integration of public health officials there to talk to families and try to counsel them at that level through this decision. But they are also kind of going back to the drawing board of trying to figure out how do we get people in those one-on-one situations where they can get good information from trusted sources. Right. But the tribe has certainly taken the stance that the vaccine is the way out of this pandemic. It is a good thing, and have run PSAs and held some events to try to answer questions and stuff. I should say the spokesperson, Ali Hostler, also noted that there is just a really deeply ingrained generational mistrust in tribal communities of the federal government and of governmental healthcare initiatives, because of course they have been, really used as a weapon at times in our past against tribal communities.
Right. And then your editorial this week is really kind of, we talked about the personal here just now, kind of veers into the personal as far as you getting your final shot, and we were talking to Jen before we went on, and she's looking for her final shot. So maybe you can just say a word or two about your editorial this week.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things I wanted to get across in the editorial. The first is, that this is something that we're all going through, and it's, as a reporter, it's kind of weird to, usually we're a bit more at arm's length with the subjects that we're covering. But with this COVID world, we're all in it together and experiencing the same things. So I was really fortunate. I got my last shot on for Friday, my second shot, and it went great. No real side effects. I feel great. And that was a decision that, my partner and I made after reading, reports in trustworthy publications, hearing from public health officials, talking to both our primary care physician and I have a couple doctors in my family that we spoke to and consulted, and then, decided that this was not just the right decision for us and our family, but the right decision for the community. And so that's why we did it. And then the other thing I touched on in the editorial that I just wanted to mention really briefly is I asked both Dr. Dittmer and Dr. Stockton kind of what do you most want people to know about this disease and this vaccination effort? And Dr. Stockton said, the thing that she wants folks to know is not only is she vaccinated, her husband's vaccinated, their children are vaccinated, but she also said that all of her colleagues that she knows virtually that have kids who are under the age of 16, so kids who are not yet eligible for this vaccine, have been trying everything they can to get those kids enrolled in the trials to test these on kids. And she said that's just a testament to how safe and effective they feel like this vaccine is that they're lining up their kids before they're actually eligible to get it. And then Dr. Dittmer, similarly said that the vaccines are just really have proven to be really amazingly effective and safe. And then, said that while people kind of say they don't, they have trepidations about the vaccines because they haven't been studied over the long term and stuff, just kind of reminding people that the same goes for COVID. But what we know of COVID at this point, is, when somebody gets sick, is that this isn't just a respiratory disease. It affects kind of every organ in the human body. And we don't know what the long-term impacts of that are. We do know that, some studies have shown about a quarter of people who get COVID have some form of long COVID and lasting side effects and stuff like that. And so from her standpoint, if you put the unknowns of the disease versus the unknowns of the vaccine side by side, there's just no choice. It's obviously that you don't want COVID, and so you want the vaccine. Yeah. And I just thought those were pretty unequivocal endorsements.
And, as we're all going through this, we're all deciding, okay, do I put my kids back in school? Okay, do I get the vaccine? How do I manage, masking and, gathering with loved ones and all? Everybody at the Journal is going through these same things. I personally just wait for Thad to do all this research and then kind of draft behind him. And then I just sort of, I have these phone calls where I'm like, so what are you going to do and why? And then I just sort of wait for him to tell me. But it is hey, listen, everybody asks me what to order at a restaurant. We all have our field.
Well, I think there is some of that. I think out in the community, in that people are waiting and watching and seeing what happens with people that have taken the vaccine. And I wonder about. There's been a lot of talk about side effects and some maybe bad reactions and. My experience has been that's been a fairly hit or miss sort of thing. Not everybody has a side effect or has any sort of debilitating problem from it. But I've also at the same time read where people have not taken the second vaccine, maybe out of fear of these side effects. So. Was there any sort of feeling as to ways to counsel people that, hey, even if there are side effects, boy, there are a lot less than actually getting COVID?
Yeah, Dr. Dittmer and Dr. Stockton didn't speak to kind of counseling people through that choice directly. They clearly think that any potential side effects of the vaccine really pale in comparison to actually getting COVID. But I think what health officials are saying is that, I think the side effects get a lot of attention and they get a lot of anecdotal play because if you talk to four people and they say, yeah, I was fine, I was a little bit tired. And the fifth one is like, well, I got nauseous or something. You're going to say, well, I know somebody who got nauseous from the vaccine. And so those are the kind of the stories that get repeated.
Yeah.
Although if you've survived the Humboldt crud, and if you are watching this, you have 100% survived the Humboldt crud. Like, what can harm you?
That's right.
Really,
True.
I mean, COVID is new and
You're
terrifying and all that. But in terms of the side effects of a vaccine, alumni of Humboldt crud, I think, have little to fear.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's
and as far as folks skipping the second dose, I mean, I would also just say that, one of the things that is unknown about the vaccine at this point is how long immunity lasts afterwards. I mean, they've proven enormously effective at stopping critical illness and death, but we're unsure exactly how that long that lasts. So officials are saying really, that second dose, it really get the maximum immunity you can to be protected as long as possible, especially if you're taking the step of getting the first dose. Just follow through and get it done.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, Jennifer, let's move on to you on the Arts and Features beat this week. Apparently, someone is having the noodle dream. Can you tell us about that?
It is. So this week, I'm sorry I couldn't get her on the show, but Wendy Chan, who someday we will nab and bring onto this show. The delightful Wendy Chan has a recipe for us this week for a roasted sesame and peanut spicy cold noodle, which we're just now getting into the temperatures where a cold noodle seems like a good idea. So tear this out on paper and stick it to your fridge for days when you don't want to be cooking, because you will need it, or save it if you read online. But what I really loved about this story that she told in the beginning was she used to work at a restaurant in the Bay Area. She lived in San Francisco. She waited tables a few places, but one of the places that she worked was a Taiwanese joint. And she worked with all kinds of people that she has really warm memories of. One of whom was a very kindly, sort of fatherly chef who one day made her some noodles that were this wonderful, Szechuan peppercorn and a spicy hot chili oil peanutty noodle. And she was like, oh my God, this is so good with the first bite. And then it started to heat up. And then it kept heating up. And as she put it in the story, she says, I was swearing, like she was sweating and cursing. And then everybody's laughing. And if you've ever been that person who you realize you are the weakest chili in the chain, when everybody else can eat the spicy thing but you. And she's from Guangdong province, or like a Cantonese. The Cantonese girl can't handle the heat, is what they were saying to her. And you know what? I identify, as I have said many times, I'm Japanese Irish. We can't handle the heat. I got nothing to prove. I love the hot chilies. I can't always handle them. But if you make this for yourself at home, you do not have the shame of being like, can I have that mild, please? And and you don't have the fear that they're going to be like, oh, she looks like she wants a hot though. And, at home, I can sweat off my mascara and it's fine. Like I'm wearing mascara at home. But it's a really simple recipe. She has been, chasing after that taste for, decades, trying to recreate this. And she finally nailed it by toasting her own sesame seeds and peanuts. That seems to make a big difference. And she offers the option of either let me see, what did she have? She had, there's sesame oil, but she has either chili sauce or chili oil. I can testify that if you are a person who loves the crispy chili oil that people are lately obsessed with, that also works. If you are a person who needs this to be hotter and hotter and hotter, you can do it. And I think that's what I love about making this at home. It's easy. There are multiple noodles you can use. If you are a person who cooks Asian food, you probably have either soba or dry Chinese noodles or something like that at home. You can substitute, throw a cucumber on it. It's actually vegetarian, and vegetarian in a very, very satisfying way. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about vegetarian food being not satisfying. But this is that wonderful, earthy, rich sesame and peanut taste. And then you can also, literally just set yourself on fire by adding more chili oil if you are that way. I prefer to keep it mild in the general sauce if you make some. And I would strongly suggest it last. So you can make it ahead and double it. And then you have it around. It's really good on leftover chicken. I can testify that if you are standing with a Costco chicken at your kitchen counter, just dredging meat into the sauce, it's very good. I have zero shame.
Just set up the pitchers of water.
Yeah,
line them up and have them ready to go.
Milk. You really want milk. You really want milk.
Okay.
But
that's the pro tip.
Yeah, you can host your own, Cantonese version of hot ones in your house. But, you just make this ahead, and then you can have the extra chili oil and extra, chili sauce at the table for people who want to go hard. But it's just a lovely, easy thing to make, to toss all this stuff into a blender to make the sauce, and then, or a food processor, and then just boiling noodles and letting them cool. It's the easiest thing in the world. And it is a thing that you can, if you are ready to have a backyard gathering with your family, now that, people are able to gather outdoors, I strongly suggest it as the thing you bring, because everybody's done with your potato salad. Bring something new.
Nice. Well, we can all get our Schofield measuring apps.
Right, and I'm told that you can increase your tolerance over time. You can get more chili strong.
Now, isn't that how it always happens? Somebody gets a little taste of it, and then the next thing you know, they're in an alley,
the gateway chili
with a pepper.
Mm-hmm. I think it was. Oh my gosh, help me, Tony Wallen. Tony Wallen wrote a story for us. Was it a year and a half ago or something, where he tried all of the local hot sauces, all the locally made hot sauces.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
He tried them all, and he says it gives him that, that chili pepper high that, euphoric feeling once the initial pain passes and your and your heart slows down.
And
again,
he's obviously still
euphoric.
walking around, right? So I mean, it didn't kill him.
Yeah, I checked in. He's alive.
Well, thanks so much for that, Jennifer. That's going to just about do it this week. North Coast Journal is online and on newsstands everywhere right now. Pick one up. Stay informed. Stay entertained. Thad and Jennifer, thanks so much. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks,
See you
Matt.
next week.